G'day everybody and welcome back to the Hardball Gets AFL show. This podcast is proudly brought to you by the Mazda BT50. You do ute. Today on the show, it's the 6 points going into round 11. If you haven't subscribed wherever you listen to your podcast, please do that. Leave us a rating, leave us a review and tell your mates. All right, let's get stuck in. This is the Hardball Gets AFL show. My name's Nick Rinn, joined by Chris Robinson and today Jackson Barrett, who stole my spot again.
Hey guys.
Gets in early, takes a stand-up desk.
I tell you what, this time last week, or maybe it was the week before, we started on a really bad note because Jacko was bagging out Xavier's radio station and said I listened to a rival radio station, and now we started on another poor note with Jacko just taking Rinnie's normal stand-up desk spot
just
over there.
swans in.
Am I right in saying that of the three of us, I'm the only one without a stand-up desk at my actual desk?
Yeah, that's correct.
That's
so
correct.
I feel like an hour,
An hour on your feet.
get the legs moving, you can take a load off.
It's all right. I'm not sleeping a lot at the moment, so I am actually happy to sit down. This is very handy.
If you
for me.
fall asleep halfway through, it'll be easier.
Just carry on without me if I do. So this is leading into round 11, second week of Sir Doug Nichols' round.
Mm-hmm.
Sir Doug Nichols' rounds.
Rounds, yep.
Rounds?
Rounds, multiple.
Fair bit of cracking around. Let's just get stuck right into it today because there's been a big report come out in the West Australian, exclusive by Glenn Quartermain, about a split in the West Coast Eagles board. One party plugging for Trevor Nisbet to wind up, the other plugging for Adam Simpson. Is that about correct?
That's about correct, yeah.
Righto. Well, Jacko, you got that as your first of your 6 points, mate, so let's get stuck in.
Yeah, so bit of a look at the Eagles and couldn't help thinking, obviously, an absolute disaster on Sunday, but you look at a few of those blokes and you just go, you're not there next year. You're not there next year. What can they get for you? So going through the 26 from last week, there's I've split these guys into categories, right? There's the category of guys that are going to be there for a little while because they're teenagers, and some of them great. We love Ruben Ginbey. We think there might be something in Campbell Chesser, probably something in Noah Long. Then there's the guys that...
I'm still a wait and see on Campbell Chesser. I know he hasn't had a run at it yet, but when he has, and he hasn't had a lot of prep going into it.
It's been a slow start.
That's fair.
Yeah,
and wait
it's
and
not
see
one
on,
you can bank on just yet.
Wait and see on Brady Hoff, but more to the point, they're going to get time. They'll be there for a couple of years. But if you look at the guys that are known quantities, the Eagles know what they're going to get out of them and will keep. I reckon there's only 6 or 7 out of the 26. So Oscar Allen is a tick. He's there long term. Tim Kelly's a tick. Jake Waterman is probably a tick. Jaden Hunt is one of only 3 of their players that are rated above average or elite in their own category. 3 out of a whole squad.
He's been pretty good.
Liam Duggan we love. Jermaine Jones has found a great new role. Dom Sheed I've got a bit of an asterisk on. I think they probably hold on to him, but hasn't set the world alight this season.
Hold on. Well, how old's Dom?
Late 20s.
27, 28?
He's right in his prime. Should be, yeah.
He'll
And
be
then
sticking
He's
around.
okay.
Obviously, the guys that they'll be
Jacko's
looking
this
at.
year ending careers.
I'm
Just swans in,
sacking blokes.
stealing chairs,
Stealing
ending
chairs
careers.
and taking names.
Of the guys that there's sort of value on their head, really, it's only Andrew Gaff that played. And then the rest of them are just like, what is your role? What are you doing?
28. He's 28.
Are you there next year? So just sort of wanted to get your take on who's a lock, like who's there next year. And of that 26, could it be as little as 6, 7, 8 guys that are actually there next year? Is that how dire it is?
That jumps out to me as way too dire, that number.
Okay.
You're saying 6 of those 26 guys?
Closer to 9.
Yeah. But are you counting the kids in that, though?
No.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
Not the kids. So the kids are
So the
locked.
group of kids was like 6
I've got
or 7?
Hoff, Chesser, Jimby, Long and Barnett that were in the 26 and will get their time.
Was Barnett in the 26?
Yeah, it was late in for Brass.
Righto. There's probably the one thing that they're going to come across is the fact that you just can't turn over that many people.
Yeah.
Sustainably, like there's not that many good kids coming through that you can add to your list to replace them.
But they're probably looking at having to make like 10 list changes, right?
Yeah, at the very least, like it'll be
Yeah.
10 to 15. I'm trying to think of what some of the bigger cuts have been recently, but it'd have to be in that same
I think
bracket.
they might have been 12 last year.
They
The
turned
Eagles.
over
It was
12?
a significant number. It was 10 or 12 or something last year.
It'd have to be something close to that again. The only problem is, where you find that talent to replace it, even if you're getting young guys, what are the AFL national draft's been going to like pick 60, so 60, 70 kids max getting picked up every year. So, and that's between 18 clubs. So finding enough people that you can actually bank on or have the faith into that are going to come around is going to be their main problem there in terms of turning them over. But there's certainly, if they can get a couple of guys off their list for future picks. But again, there's not a lot of currency there either. Like, it's going to have to be cuts rather than trades, right?
What about guys that are a little bit 50-50? So like a Luke Foley, they've slid up onto a wing. What are they going to get out of him? Harry Edwards, like even 12 months ago, we probably thought, good young player, key position.
He's had injuries this year, right?
Yeah, he's only played the past 2, I think.
Yeah. I think there was an ankle and maybe a wrist in there as well. And
I
then
think
there's
they
like,
give him time.
There's like True, O'Neill, Winder, who are those guys?
Some of those guys have already been delisted and put on a rookie list.
Yeah,
you think
true.
you're going to be in trouble, right?
Yeah.
You say True's in true false, or like Zane True?
Zane, yeah.
True
What
lies.
about the two more mature ones? So Greg Clark and Connor West.
Yeah, they're probably ones that are in a little bit of trouble. Unless you just want to keep them on there as the backups while you're getting the kids through. Because realistically, in any other club, a lot of these kids would be playing waffle footy and like you want to earn, like, or at least have a couple of cracks.
Of course, yeah. So it has a massive flow-on effect.
Not the Jimby types, because they're the guys you want to get in immediately, but the type under that who you want to develop a little bit before
Chesser,
exposing
Hoff,
them.
Bazzo.
Yeah, although I like Hoff. Hoff made a pretty early impression. I like Hoff, even though I think he slid back a little bit this year. But you want them to be running through the waffle, so you kind of need a couple of those guys to just plug in if you need them at the senior level. And again, they're not. I don't think they're taking the spot of a kid because there's only so many kids you can put through there in one go. I'm
really interested to see what happens at the other end in terms of the experienced guys and whether West Coast try and offload them elsewhere, because this is something we're sort of talking about this with my mates the other day. This is something that West Coast has never done, really. So you look at other clubs, obviously we know Hawthorn, after their sort of premiership era, just about everybody walked out the door and went somewhere else. Mitchell, Lewis, Hodge, Birchall, heaps of those guys went. And then North Melbourne have kind of done something similar by wrapping up some of those guys. Drew Petrie came over here. Whereas with West Coast, they've never done that. So looking at their list of 25 most capped players, there's only one who's gone somewhere else, which is Ben Cousins, which is obviously an asterisk. You have to go all the way down to Quinton Lynch for someone who was,
Collingwood,
an Eagle, effectively an Eagle for life, and then finished somewhere else. So they don't traditionally do that. But will they be forced to do that, or will they have an inkling to do that with the likes of Gaff and Darling and Shuey and these guys?
Just to wrap up West Coast, I just want to touch a little bit on the back and forth last night. So we're recording this on, if I knew what day
Thursday
it was, that would
late
be
morning.
Recording this Thursday morning. So last night, Rhino obviously goes at 7 News, reports that Adam Simpson's going to be offered 3 months leave at the end of the season to sort of recharge and come back for the long grind ahead. There's other reports on Channel 9 and in the Herald Sun. Also, the Herald Sun has a statement from a club spokesman confirming they'll be offered to leave. About an hour later, there's another statement from them saying it's all fake. So
from West Coast,
From West Coast. Yep. So this just gives you a little bit of an indication of what's going on there in terms of the right hand not talking to the left. So we know where the information came from, obviously a source at the club, because it's independently reported by 3 different outlets. One of them where it has an actual club spokesman attached to a statement, and then the club itself comes out and denies something which they've confirmed only hours later. So that gives you a bit of an indication of the mess they're in, both on and off the field, or the fact that it's not restricted to on the field either. Off our into, so we've got a mid-season draft, speaking of drafts and getting the kids through. Mid-season draft coming up next week. And I wanted to run it past you or have a discussion about what kind of players are the best ones to target in this draft, whether you use it as trying to get someone in to help bolster your list in areas you're deficient in, or whether you're just stockpiling kids. Some of the most successful ones I've thought of over the last few years, so the sort of three like top of the tree here are John Noble at Collingwood, clearly.
Yep. John
Newcombe at Hawthorn, and Marlon Pickett. So John Newcombe was, I think he was only 19, so he was undrafted and then went nuts for Box Hill, and Hawthorn picked him up from there. John Noble and Marlon Pickett were a bit older when they got on the list and filled a need at the time and have both been able to go on with it. Marlon Pickett, of course, playing in premierships. John Noble en route to a premiership, it would appear so. And John Newcombe, a really important part of that list. So a lot of them are mids and role players, and I think that's what we're seeing come through the mid-season draft more often than not. I can't remember. I think it's Jason Edwards, who North Melbourne picked early. The ruck forward. Have we even seen any of him?
Was he number one?
He was the first.
Yeah, he was number one of number one?
Yeah. We've barely seen him. And the rucks who go through there, I think, are recycled pretty quickly, although Bryn Teakle at Port Adelaide's getting a bit of a crack this year. Yeah. So most of the ones in line or being discussed as the higher chances this year seem to be forwards and rucks. So there's Ryan Marich, the 193 centimetre forward from Victoria. Robert Hansen Jr., small forward from over here. You probably saw a bit of him last year.
Yeah, playing for Subi, bit of Colt stuff, and then playing league for Subi. I've seen him this year as well.
Jack
Buller from Claremont, key forward, and then sort of Clay Tucker's a ruck from Victoria. Sam Naismith, a 30-year-old ruck, which shows that there probably are a couple of clubs hoping to fill a need, and normally that need comes in the ruck too. So if you can get someone in there to help chop you out for a little bit, it might be worth the dip. But what do you see as the best way to attack this?
I think it just depends where you're at. So I think for West Coast, the move last year was Jai Cully, pick one. It was like a best available approach, right? So I think there's just very much two different ways to go about it. I think West Coast did it the right way. I think probably at the time North did it the right way. They're a side that over the last half a decade haven't had a lot of rucks. They probably felt like they needed a bit of cover there. I really love Jack Buller. Like, I've watched a lot of Claremont this year. Takes big marks, moves really well. His goal kicking is sort of been the knock, but he's coming along. So I'd love to see West Coast give him a crack. And my thing is sort of like, if there's 10 or 12 or however many games to go this season, would you rather Jack Darling or Jack Buller? And obviously, I'm all for experienced players giving a contest down the line and that sort of thing, but Darling hadn't really done that. So I think I'd love for someone, and particularly the Eagles, to have a look at like a Buller, because he's gone undrafted, but he's still only 20. I think 21? Buller might be 21, so a little bit older, but for a key forward, still plenty of time.
It's not a bad time to get a key forward, young key forward, right?
With a bit like 2-3 years of league experience as well, played in a league grand finals. So I think it's very much just like, where are you at the time? Collingwood's had a lot of success because Ash Johnson was mid-year as well. So
Ash Johnson was mid-year.
Between him and Noble, there's two guys that have come in a little bit more mature and have come in at a list that was like building towards, or they felt was building towards the top end.
And now they're important parts of a contender / premiership favourite.
But I think that's no less a success story than Jai Cully might end up being at West Coast.
Yep. So I wanted to have a look. So we're 10 rounds in, which is a big enough sample size for what we're dealing with here. I had a bit of a look back at the ladder leaders after round 10 and what they've ended up doing in any specific season. So that's obviously Collingwood now. They've got North and West Coast over the next 2 weeks. Is that right, for Collingwood? So they're clearly going to stay there for at least the immediate future. So going back over the most recent seasons and the team that led after round 10. So this time last year, Melbourne were 10-0, were leading. Ended up losing, didn't even make it to the prelim, ended up losing the semi-final. Year before that, Bulldogs lost the grand final. 2020, Port went on to lose the prelim. 2019 was Geelong, went on to lose the prelim. 2018 was West Coast, who did go on to win it all. And then 17 was Adelaide, who lost the grand final. 16 was North, if you can believe that. We're leading after 10 rounds, barely scraped into the finals and lost in the first week. They were leading after 10 rounds.
I have
in 2016.
no memory of this.
Yeah, they just jumped everybody at the start. Okay. This was like the last year of their Harvey, Petrie, old guard.
Random prelim.
I can't remember who the other club was, but I think I remember two sides being 9 and 10 zip and then playing each other.
Potentially.
Was that year?
But this was still... Like in 2015, North made a prelim in 2015.
Yeah.
North were up against West Coast here in the prelim in 2015 before West Coast turned it around. So they were still all right in 2016. Freo, obviously, in 2015, jumped the field and then went on to lose the prelim. And Port Adelaide in 2014 lost the prelim. So out of the past 9 seasons, only one club who's been leading after 10 rounds has won the flag, and only 2 more have even made the grand final. So 6 of the 9 clubs who have led at this stage in the past 9 seasons haven't even made the GF. If you had to have a choice right now, are you taking Pies or are you taking the field for premiers?
I'll take the field.
Jacko?
It's hard to sit here and say that, or stand here and say that.
Stand there,
that's just
don't be
too soon
scared.
to make that joke. It's too soon.
It's hard to come on here and say that Collingwood aren't going to win the premiership, but they're pretty good numbers. So I'm probably taking the field as much as I like Collingwood.
Well, yeah, you get a what? Oh, I'm not going to say 17 because it's 17-1 bet because there's probably a fair few we can take
to
off.
put it into context, Collingwood's paying, I think, like $3.50 for the flag. So the inverse of that in a 2-horse race is, what, $1.30, something in that range. So the field is clearly favourite there. But it's interesting to think that, recent history shows that it's not the club that does it in the first half of the season and then just goes on to street everybody. It's more a club that shows the form in the second half of the season. That might well be Collingwood as well.
Yeah,
they haven't played North Melbourne, Hawthorn or West Coast yet, have they?
I think
or maybe they played one of them.
Yeah,
okay.
The draw's nice, and then the history of winning close ones and winning big ones helps as well.
Does. Yeah. I mean, they don't have any big deficiencies, do they?
No, not at all. And while we're on Collingwood, might as well jump into my point, given we got an easy bridge here, which is Steel Sidebottom coming up to game 300 this weekend. I shared on Twitter this week some of his TAC Cup highlights. I don't know why that remains like such a clear memory for me across footy, but his 10 goals in the TAC Cup grand final.
Pretty big grand final
and
performance.
I think it was live on Fox Footy before a different game, and we must have been very invested in the draft back then. I think Freo was shit, so
had a bit more time on your hands 10 years ago.
Did have a bit more time on my hands 10 years ago as well.
Yeah.
I think we were also strangely invested in Tom Lee getting drafted that year, which he did at the back end too.
Yeah.
So there was a bit going on.
Tom Lee.
Mate,
didn't quite go as well as Steel Sidebottom career-wise, but
no,
still,
not quite.
Still did some.
So 300 games. He was pick 11 that year after the 10 goals in the grand final. He's the fourth Magpie in history to play 300 games, which surprised me.
That's staggering.
There's actually a lot more, and there's probably another tangent to go into here, which we won't go too deep into, but a lot more 300 games probably since the turn of the century than there were before it.
Absolutely. Yeah,
the longevity of players, or the fact that there's only one league as well helps.
Modern sports science.
Modern sports science. There's a fair bit in it. And the ones I was about to bring up someone who might have played 400 games across all of Australian rules, but it doesn't count. But we're not going to talk about him because he's got some other stuff going on in his life. But he's played, so he's coming up to 300 games. There was a strange, AFL issued a congratulatory press release, and there's an article on the website, which is I don't remember.
Does not everybody get
too
that?
many of those? I don't think they do. At 300 games.
Okay.
It was a very good release, and it had lots of good stats and everything in it, but I thought it was a little bit strange. But
yeah. But Steele's been an incredible player, but in terms of the category of 300 game all-time greats, he's towards the lower end of that.
Yeah, but the thing about Steel Sidebottom is he's been so consistent his entire career that you probably take him for granted a little.
Totally.
Apart from 2018 where he was, especially through the finals, if you didn't look after Steel Sidebottom, you were in a bit of trouble. And that was obviously his career year. He won the Gary Ayres Medal as player of the finals, which is a very underrated medal, I think, overall. Yeah. I like the Gary Ayres medal.
It's a very strange medal.
Well, you just you get your votes through the finals. You were the best player.
I know. I love it, and I love the concept of it, but it's also really dependent on how many games you play. So it rewards the clubs that don't go straight through. They've changed that now where it's, I think, you get double votes in the grand final if you reach the grand final. There's some quirks with it.
Also won a best and fairest and All-Australian that year and was runner-up in the Brownlow.
Yeah, and was almost in a premiership side, right? Was so close to being the best player that season for a premiership side.
What was the actual margin in that game?
5 points,
5 points. It was one goal.
It's pretty, and I guess this comes naturally with 300 gamers, but it's pretty staggering how many eras he's traversed at Collingwood.
Yeah,
because you think he's like Rat Pack, 09, 2010 flag, into the down years, into 2018, and now him and Pendlebury are still key pillars of this young, fresh group.
Nathan Buckley was still playing. Yeah, I think he would have had 2 crossover seasons possibly with Bucks.
Yeah, he would have too.
Yeah, he's been there for a while, and from all reports, I should say, one of the great club men, one of the most popular figures around the club as well, which is an underrated aspect of just longevity.
Lean into this. I want you to. Here's the 2008 draft. I went back to try and see what was happening in it, and it was very good, very deep. I want you to pick your 3 best out of this crop.
Yeah, go.
So, Natanui, Stephen Hill, Michael Hurley, Daniel Rich, Jack Zeeble, Phil Davis, Steele Sidebottom, Luke Shuey, Dane Beams, Dan Hanbury, Liam Shields. What is it, Luke Shields? Liam Shields, Sloan, Michael Walters, Hayden Ballantyne. So give me your best 3 out of that crop.
There are some blokes that would have been a good draft if not for some blokes crippled by injury in there.
Yeah, there's some of them. This is a question of whether you take them on like talent,
like a Stephen Hill,
Nick
Nat. But
you can even say the same about Hanbury, because Hanbury is one of those names that I just wrote down, and I think you can make a real good case for him being in that 3.
Yeah,
because you kind of forget how good he was until the past few years of his career, where it's just got him.
And Michael Hurley, top line defender, had a little bit to show as a forward when they threw him there, but he also loses about 3-4 seasons there in the Essendon mess. Not for 3 or 4 seasons of playing, but 3 or 4 seasons of being able to play at top level and
in a decent side.
And everything
Yeah.
else.
So what are we talking? Whose career?
Just pick
Who
your
would
3.
you want
Who would
across
you-
a career?
Yeah, if you were to go back in time and let's say you wanted to compete in the next 3 or 4 years and you could get 3 of those people into your side, who would you have got?
Well, the 3 I jotted down without looking at the list that I've just got here is Hanbury, Sidebottom and Natanui. So I think Natanui needs to be in that 3 as a ruckman who all Australian births speak for themselves. When he's been healthy and fit, he's been a game changer.
Yep.
Sidebottom purely for that consistency and longevity and everything he brings there. And I think Hanbury can make a case for as the best. His best was the best mids out of that.
You can pick any of them and then you get peak them.
Yeah.
Let's say that.
Yeah.
I've got Sidebottom and Nick Nat, and then the third one's a little bit open. I mean, longevity, like Daniel Rich.
You can make a case for
if
Rich.
Daniel Rich snags a premiership late in his career, then that case probably strengthens. So he's up there. Michael Walters has had a damn good career after a slow start as well. So some decent names.
Who are you taking, Nick?
Yeah, well, so I think I put Natanui in there as well as the ruck. I probably put Dane Beams in there. Like peak Dane Beams, I think, was just about the best of that mob. Unfortunately, we really didn't see it for too long. And those Brisbane years were unreal. Brisbane were no good at the time, but he was doing absolutely
doing some
everything
heavy lifting,
there. The third one's a little bit open for me, but I'll probably... Well, if I was to just put a Nuffy hat on, I'd definitely go Stephen Hill because I love watching Stephen Hill play footy, but probably over the peak of it, I don't know.
Peak Stephen Hill was damn good.
Peak Stephen Hill was damn good, but it's probably Hanbury too, It's probably Hanbury, Beams, Natanui.
So no Steele.
No, I think peak Steele Sidebottom probably is a level below those guys, but in terms of longevity and consistency, he obviously is in the top rungs. The Collingwood did very well out of that draft for their premiership, by the way, because the Sidebottom and Beams, and then Lee Brown in the latter stages in as a rookie who helped sort of change things for him.
Totally.
So I want to have a look at Carlton's midfield. They're obviously under the pump, and it's almost been washed away a little bit in this massive news week. But for the president to be doorstopped outside the club and have to back the coach, there's a bit going on there.
They've been bailed out a little bit by this news week, haven't they?
Yeah. It's been a decent news.
They've been bailed out this week.
I'm pretty fresh to the industry, but I don't remember too many news weeks like this. So Mark Pitnet has signed a 4-year deal, which I've got to say blew me away. And I know that long-term deals are a long-term gripe on this show. Xavier Ellis, if you're listening.
Shout out if you're listening.
4 years. Xavier getting a brain scan today for his other job.
Yeah, and it'll just show all the fury bailed up in there about Clayton Oliver's long-term deal. And
it's just going to be little pockets of red.
Yeah, it's very frenzied. Was there a
lingering
fresh long-term deal announced this week? It's like,
So Pitnet, I think it was Zave was saying on here, like 10, 15 years ago, like only Brownlow medalists got 4-year deals, and Mark Pitnet is not that. He's a battler at his second club.
Probably, I think KSO Kane, you probably could have got 2 with
an option. Yeah.
That would have been a bit more responsible.
But what it does is sort of locks them into this like lumbering number one ruck who can't really play anywhere else. And then it opens the door to what do they do with Tom de Koning? And then what does the rest of the midfield look like? Because contested ball stuff for them is actually in order. They're ranked 1 for contested ball differential this season. But I just feel like they're lacking a spark in there. And you look to the 2s for that. Paddy Dow's in there averaging 30. He's a little bit quicker. They've got problems in transition, but they're not picking Zach Fisher. And I just sort of want to pose, like, how do they fix this, right? Because this is a good midfield, achieving well below expectation in a top 6 side, which they should be. Ed Kerno's not playing. He's been a great servant, but he's not playing in a top 6 side. So what do they do?
Fisher was the one that jumped out at me to say, if you're going to be anything, Zach Fisher needs to be in this team and playing well.
Yeah.
I think they just need to chuck him in there and find a way to maximise him. I think they need to back him in because you're right. They need that zip. And even in the back half, we saw it just before. There were a couple of games, at least one game where Saad and Doherty both weren't there, and there was just they couldn't move the ball. And Fisher kind of gives them that sort of going mid-forward, so I think they definitely need him. Dow's an interesting one. I hadn't really considered him massively until you brought him up off air just before, and I was like, oh, that's not a bad little shout. I mean, we'll find out maybe by the time most people listen to this podcast when the team's released this afternoon. But yeah, it's quite damning for Carlton because they are effectively at full strength. They don't have any kind of major injury concerns that they can lean on, unlike their opponents this week in Sydney, who are completely battered. So there's zero excuses this week. But yeah, Fisher is the one that sort of jumped out at me as you need to back this guy in and find a way to make it work.
I feel like they've got the pieces to the puzzle. They just haven't found the right combination. Yep. And I don't want to make it sound like I'm suggesting Paddy Dow's a world beater. Like he's had some goes at AFL level and hasn't set the world alight. But I just think, so he was a top 10 draft pick, certainly a first rounder, top 5.
Even higher,
they just need to go, let's just see what we've got. I think he was the Brayshaw Chera draft, so he'd be 22, 23 now. They need to have a look at what they've got, and even if their season's slipping away, so even if it's playing him in the back half of the year and then seeing what sort of value you can get for a former top 5 pick that might be rejuvenated elsewhere, I just think they need to do a bit of a stock take in their midfield and see what they've got. We know that, Curno's going to help you win contested ball. Cripps is in there. Kennedy, Hewitt, we like, but there's just something missing at the moment, so they need to have a look at a few things.
Last point, Dees Freo. Wanted to talk about it, probably arguably the game of the round, really. Freo, pretty decent underdog for this, which surprises me a bit, betting-wise. So Melbourne, we know, have lost Clary and they've lost Lockie Hunter. Could be good news for Taj Woden, the son of a Brownlow medalist. It looks like he's probably going to get the call-up for a debut there, which makes me feel old, for one, given that Woden won the Brownlow in 2000 and now his kid's playing. Is Melbourne really real? So this time last year was when Freo went there and knocked them off when they were 10-0. It was literally this weekend last year.
Yeah,
same opponent, same ground. Freo went there, knocked them off.
Round.
Yeah, and since then, Melbourne have been 13-11 overall. So basically a 50-50 prospect. And now they lose their best midfielder and someone who's important out of the wing. So I give Freo a massive chance here. You guys are both nodding at me because you both love the Dockers. Do you give them... Are you putting their name in the tipping spread tomorrow's West Australian?
I'm tipping Melbourne.
Okay, why?
I just don't think...
So you're a Freo hater?
Yeah, because I hate Freo.
Okay.
I don't think they're quite... I don't think they're quite there yet at the MCG against Melbourne. I think Melbourne has just got a few too many options.
Okay.
I think they're just slightly better, which is why I tip them.
I'm weighing up hard whether to back Freo in for this.
Yeah, really?
I think
so what are they actually paying here? Oh, I was just trying to find out whether
it's like $3.20 or $3.40 or something.
I was just trying to find out whether this is going
to blend into hardball bets, and I'm going to back
$3 there, $3.06 they're paying.
It's pretty good value. I'm Melbourne, but giving Fremantle a red hot chance. So I'd tip Melbourne, but that's value.
Challenger game of the round. I think Adelaide, Brisbane is the other one.
Producer Michaela, who's a big Adelaide fan, nodding her head.
We've had this wicked run.
Why didn't you tell me they were in Ballarat last week when I was tipping them or pumping them up? I'm not going Ballarat.
We've had this wicked run of Sunday afternoon blockbusters, and I know it's sort of considered the graveyard spot, but I don't mind sitting down for a Sunday afternoon game.
We'll wait until West Coast get all those Sunday afternoon home games in the back of the shop. Jacko, you might be changing your tune a little bit.
I'll be finding something else to do on a Sunday.
So what do you count as the difference here? Let's say if you're going to back in Freo, what do you think the difference is going to be?
I mean... It's really hard to pick the form because Hawthorn, Sydney are banged up, and Geelong are banged up as well. But the fact that Freo's reeled off 3 straight triple-figure scores eases concerns about can they kick a winning score? Have they found something with that forward mix? I think Tracy is giving them something. He's not kicking bags of goals, but he's giving them that presence. So I think they've kind of found the combo there. And then obviously Fife, big X factor, looks like he's fit again. I think you can really make a case for them. Certainly more than the $3.05 would suggest.
Okay. Well, I think the super tight SCG maybe forced Freo to figure something out with their forward line spacing a little bit. Like they had to play Tracy higher up the ground because nothing was happening in there because it was so congested. And then they did it pretty well last week at Optus as well. I'd be a little bit worried about May and Lever. So I wonder if Banfield goes to one a little bit like he did with Stewart. They dealt with Stewart and Radicalier really well, but I think May and Lever might just be that extra notch above.
Yep.
Now it's time for
Hardball Bets. Thanks to the TABtouch app.
Oh, we're still going no good. What do you got, Robbo?
Oh my gosh. Last week I nailed the Freo 1-39 and then throw in 2 extra little bits to spice up the multi. Brisbane by 10 plus tick. Sydney by 10 plus against North. They won by 3. Good gravy.
And I don't think it's an administrative
So
error.
if anyone is still listening to these bets, please just fade. Just do the opposite of what I'm saying here. So I'm giving Freo a 30-point head start. So I'm giving them they can win or get within 30. To go with Carlton, who I'm very reluctantly going back on the bandwagon for Friday night against the banged-up Sydney. And I'm throwing in St Kilda as well to take care of Hawthorn. That's paying $3.40.
Yeah, so I've stuck with lines as well. So Carlton minus 2.5
Okay.
points, not goals.
Yep.
Freo to get within 18.5 points.
Okay.
And GWS, the line's like 40.5.
Very banged up
GWS versus Geelong.
Very banged up. But
Yeah,
that's at the Cattery.
It's at the Cattery, but Geelong are that banged up. Like, I don't think GWS is going to beat them, but I think they can get within 40 points. So I've added that in there. That's wrapped up to $6.86, and none of those are going to come in.
No. So please, gamble responsibly
Gamble
and
very
gamble
responsibly.
oppositely. That's the advice.
So that's Hardball Bets. Got the touch this AFL season. Choose TABtouch. Better your bet with TABtouch. Gamble responsibly and call Gamblers Help on 1-800-858-858. This has been the Hardball Gets AFL show, proudly brought to you by the Mazda BT50. You do Ute. We'll see you next time.